terms of failure and failing, slightly romanticized. There's a lot of talk about people failing as a good thing, and I've seen videos on failure. People talk about failure, fail fast, fail forward, fail often. And failure, there's two things with failure. If it's absolute, if it's a failure where the business has just died and there's an implication for it, then that's absolute failure in one aspect. If it's failure which is, where you can actually brush yourself down and you're testing, if I was a scientist, I would be talking about experiments. I would be saying that's an experiment. And if I was maybe, if maybe in another trade, I would be maybe talking about pilots. And if it's in that context, in terms of a pilot or experiment or, a survey or just testing things out, then that's not failure. That's actually getting you to a position where you're actually getting better, you're learning from it, and you're improving it, and then it's constant improvement, it's innovation, it's improvement. But then there's another part which is again failure in absolute terms, where something has failed, maybe a company, an organization has failed for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm. And I think what you're saying, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, of course, is that failure is part and parcel of life, and we all have to learn to fail because it's the way that we learn most of the time. But reckless failure, the attitude that, okay, if I fail, I'll start something else tomorrow, is not victimless. If a business fails, then there are implications for the people who work for that business, there are implications for customers, there are implications for suppliers, people don't get paid, and that has ramifications like throwing a pebble into a pond. They can go quite deep and they can go quite a long way. So I think you're saying, and tell me if I'm wrong, that it's okay to fail, and that will happen from time to time, but we shouldn't take a cavalier attitude to failure, because we should understand that impacts upon a lot of lives in a very serious and often important way. Is that fair?
Okay. From a personal perspective, failure, again, I've often heard people talk about failure or fail as first attempt in learning. So it's their first attempt in learning, and it's a continuous process. Then you can take it away from that and talk about an organization failing, even economies, countries failing, and whether that should be allowed and whether that should be something that we should harness and protect. And I think you can go the other way in terms of protectionism and other way in terms of subsidies. And unfortunately for me, I think the country has gone through that process where there's been too much protectionism. There's been subsidies. There's been an element of where organizations really, their purpose has changed, the world has changed, and we've been trying to safeguard certain things on the basis that we can't deal with the consequences. Sometimes it's necessary as part of evolving and changing. You're from the media profession. Print media has completely changed, and then you can't keep it to what it is, and it's got to evolve and it's got to change. So it's in the context of the world. It's in the context of things do change, and for that change to happen, unfortunately, some organisations do need to fail. There is a consequence to it, and I'm not saying that consequence is easily digestible. There is always people behind it, but it's also life itself.